They killed every human, billions slaughtered without mercy, cities reduced to rubble, Earth's defenses decimated. But deep beneath the Arctic ice, a final hope stirred as Earth's last super soldiers began to awaken. Darren Morris, a skilled soldier and leader, was part of an elite corps of 1,000 genetically enhanced super soldiers, kept in cryogenic stasis chambers hidden deep underground in the Arctic as a final ace up humanity's sleeve. Topside, the ruthless alien Breen, led by the merciless Commander Pollux, had launched a devastating surprise attack on Earth, quickly overwhelming its defenses with superior technology and numbers. The Breen warriors hunted down humans like vermin, exterminating them by the billions as major cities fell. But the Breen didn't know about the fail-safe protocol, triggered by the catastrophic loss of human life that sent the signal to begin thawing the Arctic super soldier chambers. As the last remaining humans, Darren and 999 male super soldiers began to emerge from cryosleep, taking in the grim situation on the monitors. Earth lay in ruins under the control of the alien invaders, its streets littered with human corpses. Exploring the underground bunker, the soldiers discovered a huge classified armory, packed with cutting-edge weapons, powered exo-armor battlesuits, and enough firepower to make the aliens pay for what they'd done. Listening to fractured radio transmissions, Darren grimly realized the odds they faced, hopelessly outnumbered against a planet full of technologically superior hostiles. The fate of the human race itself rested on their shoulders. But as the natural leader, Darren refused to let despair take root, knowing that hesitation meant extinction. If they hit fast and hard, exploiting any weakness and never gave up the fight, then maybe, just maybe, they could seed a future for mankind once more. It was time to suit up and bring the battle to the enemy. Topside, the Breen invaders meticulously scoured the ravaged cityscape, scanning for the slightest trace of human life and eradicating any survivors. Commander Pollux allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction, confident their conquest was nearly complete. The pathetic humans finally purged from the universe. Little did they know the storm that was coming for them, the reckoning about to ascend from beneath the unforgiving ice to unleash hell on those who dared attack humanity's home. Emerging from hidden access tunnels concealed beneath thick layers of Arctic ice, Darren Morris leads the charge as the 9999 super soldiers launch a blistering surprise attack against a Breen patrol unit in the war-torn ruins of New York City. The alien soldiers, caught completely off guard, scramble for cover amidst the rubble and debris of shattered skyscrapers. Unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts and railgun rounds from their advanced weaponry, the human troops quickly seize the upper hand. The sleek, powered exoskeletons they wear enhance their strength, speed, and resilience as they relentlessly press the attack, maneuvering with fluid precision to outflank the Breen's defensive positions. During the fierce close-quarters firefight, Darren spots a high-ranking Breen officer barking orders to the beleaguered alien troops, a golden opportunity. With a burst of superhuman speed, he closes the distance, slamming an armored fist into the officer's chest and sending it crashing to the ground. Darren pins the stunned alien beneath his boot, staring down with cold fury. "Surrender, Xeno scum," Darren growls through his helmet's voice amplifier. "Unless you want to join the rest of your unit fertilizing the rubble." The Breen officer, coughing up iridescent ichor, glares back defiantly before recognition flashes in its compound eyes. You're Seleno, Pollux's second," Darren sneers. "Looks like today's our lucky day, boys." With the Breen unit routed and Seleno bound and restrained, Darren begins a harsh interrogation, determined to extract every morsel of tactical intel he can from the captive alien. The rest of the soldiers establish a secure perimeter, salvaging weapons and gear from the fallen Xenos. "The shield generators, where are they located? How are the defense grid power nodes distributed across the occupied zones?" Darren demands, his armored gauntlet wrapped around Seleno's throat. "Start talking, or we'll see how well you hold up to a few thousand volts." Seleno's mandibles click and twitch, a froth of ichor bubbling at the corners of its mouth. "You'll never defeat the Breen. We crushed your pathetic species once, and we'll do it again." "Arr!" The alien's defiance morphs into an agonized shriek as Darren sends a punishing jolt of electricity surging through its body. "I won't ask again," Darren snarls, his voice dripping with menace. "The shield generators, the command and control centers, every scrap of Breen tactical data rattling around in that ugly head of yours, give it to me." Over the next several minutes, Kaleno's tenacity crumbles under the relentless onslaught of Darren's enhanced interrogation methods. The Breen officer gradually divulges critical intel, the coordinates of a key nearby command post, the intricacies of the alien's defense grid, a specific radio frequency that their shields are ill-equipped to handle. Darren commits every detail to memory, his mind racing as he formulates a plan of attack. Tapping into his helmet comm, Darren relays the information to the other super soldier teams scattered across the globe. "Listen up. We've got a golden opportunity here. Seleno just spilled his guts. I'm transmitting the coordinates for a central Breen command post in the ruins of downtown Manhattan. We hit that, and a dozen other high-value targets simultaneously. We can deal a crippling blow to their occupation force." Darren sends out heavily encrypted data bursts with the relevant intel to the different squads, along with the radio frequency that will allow them to bypass the Breen's protective energy shielding. "Synchronize your chronometers, men. We strike hard and fast in exactly 30 minutes. Get prepped and get in position. It's time to take our planet back." As the super soldiers move out, splitting into multiple strike teams to cover their assigned targets, Darren preps his own squad for the assault on the central Breen command post. He double-checks the ammo reserves and power cells on his battlesuit, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Pollux is mine," Darren growls to his men as they approach the heavily fortified alien structure. "That sadistic bastard has this coming for what he did to Earth. Time to show these Xeno freaks what it means to piss off humanity." Breaching the outer perimeter with demolition charges and a hail of precision weapons fire, Darren and his team blast and carve their way into the heart of the command post. Alarms blare and emergency bulkheads slam shut as the Breen troops mount a desperate defense, but the humans are an implacable force, unstoppable in their fury. And then Darren sees him, amid the chaos and smoke. Pollux, barking orders as his combat armor unfolds around his wiry frame like a second skin. The Breen commander turns, locking eyes with Darren across a devastated atrium. Hatred practically crackles between them. "So the human roaches crawl out of hiding at last," Pollux spits, hoisting a vicious-looking plasma carbine. "I'll enjoy watching you die, Simeon. I think I'll keep your skull as a memento after I scorch the flesh from your bones." "Just try it, you sadistic sack of alien shit," Darren snarls back, his fingers tightening around the grips of his dual mag rifles. The weapons hum with eager menace. "I'm going to enjoy ramming my boot down your scrawny throat." And then they're in motion, charging at one another with weapons blazing, a cataclysmic collision of battle armor and flesh and seething rage. Darren ducks and weaves amid the storm of plasma fire, mag rounds screeching from the hot barrels of his rifles. His HUD paints Pollux in shades of crimson, predicting the aliens' movements as they dance their lethal duet through the atrium. Training, instinct, and raw superhuman reflexes allow Darren to slither a hair's breadth ahead of Pollux's murderous onslaught. A plasma bolt sizzles past Darren's helmeted head, slagging the wall behind him. He snap rolls behind the blasted remains of a support column, armor clacking against the rubble. Pollux howls in thwarted rage, blasting away at Darren's position in a hail of superheated plasma. "Cower, ape! It won't prolong your miserable life. This world belongs to the Breen now." Darren grits his teeth, a flashbang grenade materializing in his hand. "Earth belongs to humanity, you xenoprick." He hurls the grenade in a shallow arc, bouncing it off the ceiling to land behind Pollux. The alien only has a split second to register the threat before the world turns white. A thunderous, concussive wave slams into Pollux, rattling his armor and overloading his sensors. Ears ringing, vision a blurry kaleidoscope, he staggers back drunkenly, only to catch a glimpse of Darren exploding out from cover in a wild, armored leap. The human leads with the crackling blue disruptor blade sheathing his forearm, a distorted battle cry ripping from his throat. Time seems to slow to a crawl. Pollux' eyes widen as the blade spears toward the crack between his breastplate and collar armor. He's an eye blink too slow to deflect it. The disruptor blade, supercharged by Darren's kinetic strike, punches into the gap in Pollux' armor seamlessly. A shower of sparks erupt as the Breen commander shrieks in agony, ichor spraying. Darren rips the blade free in a vicious lateral slash, sending Pollux crashing back in a flailing tangle of limbs. The alien slams into the atrium wall with a bone-jarring crunch, his chest a smoking, shredded ruin. "You damned simian!" Pollux hisses through a bubbling froth of gore, trembling fingers scrabbling at his ruined chest. This isn't over." "It's over for you, you son of a bitch," Darren growls, slowly advancing on the fallen Breen commander. His helmeted face looms over Pollux like an avenging specter. "You're never going to threaten humanity again." Pollux's eyes dart wildly as Darren raises a mag rifle to deliver the kill shot. With a final desperate act, the Breen commander slams a clawed hand down on an emergency evac panel set into the wall. "Another day, ape," he snarls as a quantum transport field shimmers into existence around him. Darren curses, squeezing off a volley a split second too late, as Pollux teleports away in a crackle of displaced energy. "Slippery Xeno bastard," he roars, slamming an armored fist into the wall in frustration. Taking a steadying breath, Darren keys his comm. "Pollux is down but not out. The coward Quantum jumped the hell out of here. Sit rep." The rest of his team report in, confirming the command post has been secured. A flood of data from the other strike teams indicates similar successes across the globe. With the Breen command and control network crippled, Darren knows they've struck a major blow for humanity today, but he's all too aware that Pollux is still out there, along with the bulk of the Breen invasion force. The real war has only just begun. Wrenching his mag rifle free of the ruined evac panel, Darren turns to his team's tech specialist, Sergeant Hawkins. "All right, Hawkins, do your thing. Crack into these ugly alien computers and strip mine every shred of intel you can. We need to know what those Xeno bastards are planning next." As Hawkins settles behind the command console and flexes his hands in anticipation, Darren takes stock of their new forward operating base, mind racing as he plans the Resistance's next move. By God and all the angels, they'll make the Xenos pay in blood for every inch of scorched earth. Darren and his team fought their way through the Breen mothership, their advanced weapons tearing through alien defenses. Sparks flew and alarms blared as they battled corridor by corridor, securing key systems. "Hawkins, get on those weapon controls!" Darren shouted as they stormed the bridge. Sergeant Hawkins slid into the alien command chair, fingers flying over unfamiliar controls. "I'm in. Targeting systems online." The view screen lit up, showing the approaching Breen reinforcement fleet. Darren's eyes narrowed. "Light 'em up." Massive energy cannons roared to life, lancing out at the incoming ships. Explosions blossomed in the void of space as Breen vessels were shattered by their own weapons. But their victory was short-lived. Pollux's voice crackled over the comms, seething with rage. "Retake that ship at all costs. Crush these human vermin." Boarding pods slammed into the hull, disgorging waves of Breen shock troops. Darren and his soldiers found themselves in brutal close-quarters combat throughout the ship. "Jenkins, Garcia, hold the engine room." Darren barked into his radio as he ducked behind a bulkhead, plasma bolts sizzling past. "Rodriguez, get a fire team to the hangar bay." The ship shuddered as explosions rocked it. Through the chaos of battle, Darren caught glimpses of a familiar figure. Pollux himself had boarded, cutting a swath through human defenders as he made for the bridge. Their eyes met across the command center. Pollux's mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Time to end this, ape." They clashed in a fury of armored fists and crackling energy fields. Darren's enhanced reflexes were pushed to the limit as he traded blows with the alien commander. Pollux slammed Darren into a control panel, showering them both in sparks. "Your species is finished!" But Darren's iron will wouldn't break. With a roar of defiance, he smashed his helmet into Pollux' face, stunning the alien. A flurry of strikes drove Pollux back. "This is our world," Darren snarled, landing a crushing blow that sent Pollux sprawling. "And you're not welcome here." Pollux scrambled away, disappearing into the ship's corridors. But the battle had taken its toll. The mothership was crippled, venting atmosphere from multiple breaches. Darren made the call. "Hawkins, set a collision course for the fleet. Everyone else, evac now." As his soldiers raced for escape pods, Darren gripped Hawkins' shoulder. "You don't have to do this." Hawkins smiled grimly. "Someone's got to fly this beast. It's been an honor, sir." Darren's pod launched just as the mothership plowed into the Breen fleet. The explosion lit up Earth orbit, a man-made supernova that consumed scores of alien ships. On the surface, other super soldier teams coordinated their attacks. Breen command posts fell in rapid succession as the aliens' leadership crumbled. Darren linked up with the ground forces, directing strikes against the faltering invaders. But he knew Pollux was still out there, growing more desperate by the hour. Intel shows Pollux holed up in his last fortress. Darren briefed his elite squad. "Time to end this. Lock and load." They infiltrated the stronghold, battling through waves of Pollux's most fanatical troops. The final confrontation loomed as they fought their way deeper into the alien lair. The corridors of Pollux's stronghold echoed with the cacophony of battle. Darren and his squad pushed forward relentlessly, their enhanced bodies and advanced weaponry carving a path through waves of Breen defenders. "Contact left!" shouted Rodriguez as plasma bolts seared the air around them. Darren spun, his mag rifle spitting hypersonic rounds that punched through alien armor with devastating effect. But for every Breen that fell, more poured in to take their place. "They're endless," growled Jenkins, his armor scorched and dented. "We can't keep this up forever, sir." Before Darren could respond, an inhuman roar shook the very walls. From a side passage emerged a nightmarish sight, Breen soldiers warped and twisted into monstrous new forms. Bulging muscles rippled beneath chitinous armor plating, while cybernetic enhancements gleamed wickedly. "What the hell?" gasped Hawkins. The mutated Breen charged, moving with impossible speed. Darren's team opened fire, but their rounds seemed to barely slow the abominations. One of the creatures reached Private Chen, its claws tearing through his armor without effort. Chen's scream was cut brutally short. "Concentrate fire," Darren bellowed. "Aim for joint weak points." The super soldiers adjusted their tactics, coordinating their attacks with ruthless efficiency. Precision shots found gaps in the mutants' defenses, while well-placed grenades staggered the larger specimens. Slowly, agonizingly, Darren's team began to turn the tide, but the cost was high. Garcia fell to a plasma blast that overwhelmed his shields. Rodriguez lost an arm to a creature's bioacid spray. As they fought deeper into the stronghold, evidence of Pollux's mad science became horrifyingly clear. Stasis pods lined the walls, filled with half-formed monstrosities. Operating tables were stained with both human and alien blood. "He's splicing human DNA," Hawkins said, his voice thick with revulsion as he examined a nearby console, "trying to create the perfect killing machine." A final set of blast doors stood between them and Pollux's central lab. As they breached the entrance, Darren came face to face with the alien commander himself. But Pollux was changed, his body grotesquely swollen and pulsing with unnatural energy. "Welcome, human." Pollux's voice grated, distorted by his mutations. "You're just in time to witness the birth of a new era." Darren raised his weapon. "The only thing being born today is your defeat." They clashed in a fury of superhuman speed and strength. Pollux's new form granted him terrifying power, but Darren's lifetime of combat experience kept him one step ahead. The lab around them crumbled as they traded earth-shattering blows. Darren's armor cracked under Pollux's assault, pain lancing through his enhanced body. But he pushed through it, searching for a weakness in the alien's mutated form. There, a pulsing node where cybernetics met flesh, unstable and vulnerable. With a final burst of speed, Darren drove his fist into that weak point. Pollux screamed, convulsing as his unstable mutations turned against him. In moments, the alien commander collapsed, his grand ambitions reduced to a smoking ruin on the lab floor. Darren stood over his fallen foe, chest heaving. "It's over," he breathed into his calm. "Pollux is down. Repeat, Pollux is neutralized." Cheers erupted over the channel as the news spread. Across the planet, reports flooded in of Breen forces losing cohesion, their will to fight evaporating without their leader. Darren turned to his battered team. "Let's finish this. It's time to take our world back." In the days that followed, Darren led the charge to root out the last pockets of alien resistance. The Breen were driven off-world in a series of crushing defeats, their once mighty invasion force reduced to fleeing refugees. As the last alien ships vanished into the depths of space, humanity emerged to survey the cost of their victory. The planet lay in ruins, its cities shattered, its population decimated. But they had won. Earth was free. Darren stood atop a ridge overlooking the remains of what had once been Washington, D.C. Survivors were already at work, clearing rubble and salvaging what they could. They looked to him and his fellow super soldiers with a mix of awe and hope. "Sir," Hawkins approached, his face grim, "we've finished analyzing Pollux's research data. The experiments he was conducting, they're beyond anything we've seen. And there are indications that he sent the results back to his homeworld before we stopped him." Darren's fists tight. They had won the war, but he knew in his bones that this was nowhere near the end. As humanity began the long process of rebuilding, he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out in the void of space, an even greater threat was brewing. Darren stood atop the crumbling ruins of what was once a skyscraper, surveying the devastated landscape. The acrid stench of smoke and decay filled his nostrils. Shattered buildings stretched as far as the eye could see, their twisted metal frames reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. "Sir, we've got another group of survivors," Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. "About 30 civilians holed up in an old subway station. They're running low on food and water." Darren clicked his mic. "Understood. Send a team to extract them. Make sure they're screened for infection before bringing them to the safe zone." He turned to Hawkins, who was hunched over a makeshift command console. "What's our current resource situation?" Hawkins shook his head. "Not good. We're down to less than a week's worth of rations for the civilians we've already gathered. Medical supplies are even lower." Darren nodded grimly. "All right. We need to hit those Breen supply caches. Get me a map of suspected locations." As Hawkins pulled up the data, an explosion rocked the ground. Darren spun, rifle raised, to see a plume of smoke rising from the eastern sector. "Jenkins, report!" he barked into his comm. Static crackled for a moment before Jenkins's strained voice came through. "Sir, we've got a situation. One of those Breen mutants broke through the perimeter. It's tearing through the refugee camp." Darren was already moving, leaping from rooftop to rooftop with superhuman agility. "I'm on my way. All available units converge on the east sector. Contain that thing at all costs." He arrived to find chaos. A monstrous creature, easily twice the size of a man, rampaged through the makeshift shelters. Its body was a grotesque fusion of Breen and human features, bulging muscles covered in chitinous plates. Refugees fled in terror as it smashed through barriers with terrifying strength. Darren's team opened fire, their rounds pinging off the creature's armored hide. It roared in fury, charging towards them with frightening speed. "Aim for the joints," Darren shouted, ducking under a massive swipe of its clawed hand. He rolled, coming up behind the beast, and emptying his mag into the back of its knee. The creature stumbled, giving Jenkins the opening to lob a plasma grenade. The explosion engulfed the mutant in searing energy. When the light faded, the smoldering corpse crashed to the ground. Darren approached cautiously, ensuring it was truly dead. "Hawkins, get a containment team down here," he ordered. "I want this thing studied. We need to know what other surprises Pollux left behind." As the adrenaline faded, the scale of destruction became clear. Several refugees lay dead or injured, their meager shelters destroyed. "Sir," Rodriguez approached, her armor scarred from the fight. "The civilians are getting restless. There's talk of breaking away, trying to make it on their own." Darren clenched his fist. "Not an option. They wouldn't last a week out there. We need to—" He was cut off as Hawkins's voice burst over the comm. "Captain, you need to get back to command immediately. We're picking up a signal from space." Darren's eyes widened. He sprinted back to their makeshift headquarters, bursting through the door to find Hawkins frantically working at his console. "What have we got?" Darren demanded. Hawkins looked up, his face a mix of disbelief and hope. "Sir, it's human. We're picking up transmissions from multiple points in deep space. They're using old emergency protocols, but it's definitely our people." Darren leaned in, listening to the crackling, fragmented message. "Any survivors? Earth. Respond. Colony outposts stand ready." He straightened, mind racing. "Hawkins, can we respond?" The tech specialist nodded. "Yes, sir. But our equipment is limited. We'd need to boost the signal, maybe use one of the old satellite uplink stations." Darren nodded. "Do it, and get the team ready. We're going to make contact and find out just what's left of humanity out there." As Hawkins set to work, Darren stared out at the ruined city. For the first time since the invasion, a flicker of real hope burned in his chest. They weren't alone, and if humanity had survived among the stars, perhaps Earth could be saved after all. But a shadow of doubt crept into his mind. If humans had survived out there, what about the Breen? The war might be a long way to go. Darren squared his shoulders, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The fight for Earth's future was just beginning. Darren's boots clanged against the metal deck as he strode through the airlock of the Exodus. The stale, recycled air hit him like a wall, carrying the unmistakable scent of too many bodies crammed into too small a space for far too long. His enhanced senses picked up on the undercurrent of fear and desperation that permeated the ship. Haggard faces peered out from makeshift living quarters fashioned from cargo containers and salvaged materials. Children with hollow cheeks and haunted eyes clung to their parents, while adults moved with the slow, deliberate motions of those conserving every ounce of energy. Admiral Marcus Trevelyan met Darren at the entrance to the bridge, his once crisp uniform hanging loose on his gaunt frame. The Admiral's eyes widened as he took in Darren's combat-scarred armor and the vital strength of his team. "My God," Trevelyan breathed. "You're really from Earth. We were certain—" Darren nodded grimly. "Earth stands, Admiral. Battered, but not broken. We drove Pollux and his forces off-world." The bridge crew let out a ragged cheer, the first glimmer of hope many had felt in years. Trevelyan's shoulders sagged with relief before he straightened, military bearing reasserting itself. "Captain Darren Morris," he said, extending a hand. "Your arrival is nothing short of a miracle. We've been running on fumes and prayers out here." As they shook hands, Darren took in the jury-rigged systems and exhausted crew. "Admiral, I need to know everything. How did you escape? What's the situation beyond our solar system?" Trevelyan's face darkened. He led Darren to a holographic display, its image flickering and unstable. "It was chaos, Captain. The Breen hit us everywhere at once. Luna Base, Mars Colony, the Belt Stations, all under simultaneous assault." The display showed the solar system, red markers indicating Breen attack points spreading like a virus. Trevelyan continued, his voice hollow. "We got the evacuation warning from Earth just as Luna Base was overrun. I commandeered the Exodus. She was a colony ship, not even finished with her maiden trials. We loaded as many survivors as we could and ran." Darren leaned in, studying the outdated star charts. "And the other colonies? The outposts?" Trevelyan shook his head. "Gone dark. We've picked up scattered distress calls, but—" He trailed off, the weight of countless lives lost evident in his eyes. "We can't stay on the defensive," Darren said, his mind already formulating strategies. "The Exodus is a liability if we're constantly running. We need to take the fight to them." Trevelyan nodded slowly. Agreed. But how? We're barely keeping this ship together as it is. Darren outlined his plan, watching as a spark of tenacity ignited in the Admiral's tired eyes. For the next several hours, they pored over star charts and sensor logs, plotting a course through the asteroid fields where Breen forces might be hiding. Days turned into weeks as the Exodus became a mobile command center. Darren's soldiers worked alongside the ship's crew, repairing systems and training for the battles to come. They struck at Breen outposts, each victory bolstering morale and providing precious resources. The true test came when long-range sensors detected a Breen carrier on an intercept course. Darren knew it was a trap, but also their best chance at gaining critical intelligence. All hands, prepare for combat! Trevelyan's voice rang out over the ship's comms as Darren led his team to the airlock. The void of space erupted in a silent light show as the Exodus engaged the Breen ship. Darren and his soldiers launched in boarding pods, their trajectory masked by the chaos of battle. They breached the Breen hull, immediately engaging in close-quarters combat. Alien shrieks and the staccato of gunfire filled the air as Darren's enhanced reflexes allowed him to dance between plasma bolts. "Push to the bridge!" Darren shouted, his mag rifle spitting death at inhuman speeds. His team formed up, their movements a deadly ballet honed by countless battles. They fought their way through twisting corridors, alien bodies piling up in their wake. On the bridge, Darren personally engaged the Breen commander, his augmented strength allowing him to crush the alien's exoskeleton with his bare hands. As the last Breen fell, Darren turned to Hawkins. "Get me everything you can from their systems. We need to know what we're up against." The intelligence they uncovered chilled Darren to his core. The Breen's plans were far more extensive than anyone had imagined. This wasn't just an invasion, it was extermination on a galactic scale. Back aboard the Exodus, Darren and Trevelyan gathered their top advisors. The mood was somber as they digested the true scope of the threat. "We can't win this alone," Trevelyan said, his voice heavy. "We need to find the other survivors, build a real fleet." Darren nodded, his eyebrows furrowed. "There's a trading post in the Arcturus system. Neutral ground. If we can get word out, it could be our rallying point." They worked tirelessly, piecing together Earth's shattered sensor network and decoding Breen transmissions. Slowly, a picture emerged of scattered human vessels and hidden outposts, each one a potential ally in the fight to come. Darren addressed the combined crews, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's future. "We're going into the deep black. Every ship, every colony we can find, we bring them in. We build our strength. And then we show the Breen that humanity won't go quietly into the night." As the Exodus prepared to jump to its first target, Darren stood on the observation deck. The stars stretched out before him, each one a potential battlefield in the war to come. He knew the odds were stacked against them, but he also knew the strength of the human spirit. They would fight, they would survive, and they would win, whatever it takes. The void of space stretched endlessly before the Exodus as it plowed through the cosmic darkness. Darren stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing their perilous course. Red zones marked deadly radiation fields, while blinking icons represented potential Breen scout positions. "Adjusting course, sir," the navigator announced, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Radiation levels spiking in Sector 7. Darren nodded, feeling the subtle shift as the massive ship altered its trajectory. The crew worked with quiet efficiency, every action precise and purposeful. They'd come too far to fail now. Days blurred together in the monotony of space travel until a faint ping broke the silence. Admiral Trevelyan leaned forward, hope etched on his weathered face. "We've got something. Human transponder signals bearing 047 Mark 32. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as they homed in on the signal. A dead world loomed before them, its surface a blasted wasteland. But there, orbiting the lifeless planet, hung a dilapidated station. Darren led the boarding party, mag boots clanking against the airlock floor as they entered the outpost. Stale air assaulted his nostrils, carrying the unmistakable scent of human habitation long past its expiration date. They found the crew huddled around banks of antiquated equipment, faces gaunt and eyes hollow from years of ceaseless vigilance. At their center stood Captain Harding, his once crisp uniform hanging loosely on his frame. "Impossible," Harding whispered, disbelief etched on his features as Darren explained their mission. "Earth liberated?" Trevelyan stepped forward, his voice filled with quiet authority. "It's true, Captain. And now we need every able body to join the fight. The Breen threat isn't over." Harding's posture straightened, a fire kindling in his eyes. "You heard the Admiral, people. Pack it up. Our watch is over." The outpost's databanks yielded a promising lead, coordinates to a fringe colony that might have escaped the Breen's notice. Hope surged through the growing fleet as they set course for this potential sanctuary. But the cosmic wastelands took their toll. Darren watched the Exodus's power readouts with growing concern as fusion reactors strained to breaking point. "We can't risk the entire fleet," Trevelyan stated, his face grim in the dim emergency lighting. "Take a recon team ahead in the shuttles. We'll follow as quickly as we can." Darren's shuttle punched through the atmosphere of the colony world, only to find devastation beyond imagining. Cities reduced to ash, the very bedrock scarred by orbital fire. His team picked through the ruins, radiation detectors clicking ominously. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, her voice tense. "I'm picking up a signal, heavily encrypted but definitely human." Darren studied the readout, a spark of hope flaring in his chest. "It's a vector. Coordinates to somewhere else. Prep for immediate launch. We follow that signal." The shuttle plunged recklessly through a field of debris, jagged chunks of metal and rock scraping against the hull. And then, emerging from the chaos, they saw them. A ragtag fleet of civilian ships, battered and barely spaceworthy. At the fleet's heart, a military frigate stood guard. Darren's shuttle docked, and he found himself face to face with Colonel Samantha Miles. Her eyes held a steel that even the horrors of war couldn't dull. "You're a sight for sore eyes, Captain," Miles said, extending a hand. "We thought we were the last ones left." As they worked to integrate the survivors into their growing armada, Miles recounted the Breen's savage assault on her world. Her words painted a picture of merciless destruction, entire continents scoured clean of life. "We barely got out," she finished, her voice hollow. "A handful of civilian ships and my frigate to guard them. But now—" Darren nodded, understanding the unspoken question. "Now we fight back. Together." The combined fleet set course for the rallying point, a newfound willpower burning in every heart. They were no longer scattered survivors. They were humanity's last, best hope. And the Breen would soon learn the cost of pushing humanity to the brink. Darren stood before the assembled war council, his face etched with grim purpose. The holographic display flickered, casting an eerie blue glow across the faces of Admiral Trevelyan, Colonel Miles, and the other gathered leaders. "The situation is dire," Trevelyan said, his voice low. "We've lost contact with outposts in the Centauri and Procyon sectors. The Breen are moving faster than we anticipated." Colonel Miles leaned forward, her eyes hard. "It's not just silence. We've picked up distress signals cut short, energy signatures consistent with orbital bombardment. They're methodically wiping us out." Darren's expression resolute. "Then we hit them first, hard, where they least expect it." Sergeant Hawkins stepped up, tapping commands into his datapad. The holographic display shifted, zooming in on a star system deep in Breen territory. "We cracked some of their encryption. This is their primary staging area for the entire sector." The council members leaned in, studying the intricate network of supply depots and military installations. But it was the planets themselves that drew gasps of horror. "My God," someone whispered, "they're terraforming on a massive scale." "Xenoforming," Darren corrected grimly, "remaking worlds in their image. This ends now." The next hours were a flurry of activity. Darren moved through the ship, overseeing last-minute upgrades to weapon systems. Engineers worked feverishly, integrating captured Breen tech into human designs. In the hangar bay, Colonel Miles briefed her pilots. "This is a feint, people. Hit and run. Make them chase you. Pull them out of position. Every second you keep them occupied buys time for the main assault." Darren led his own briefing in the drop bay. Super soldiers checked and rechecked their gear as he outlined the mission. "We're going in hot, behind enemy lines. Our target is the xenoforming hub. We take it out. We cripple their entire operation in this sector." The assault began with Miles's strike force. Human fighters danced through debris fields, drawing Breen pursuers into carefully laid traps. Explosions bloomed silently in the void as ships on both sides were caught in the crossfire. Darren felt the familiar lurch as his drop pod launched. The armored shell shuddered as it punched through the atmosphere. Warning klaxons blared as Breen point defense systems tried to track the incoming assault. They hit ground hard. Darren's enhanced body absorbed the impact as he burst from the pod, weapon ready. All around him, his soldiers emerged, a well-oiled machine of destruction. The xenoforming facility loomed before them, a nightmarish edifice of alien architecture. As they fought their way inside, the true horror revealed itself. Massive tubes pulsed with sickly fluids, half-formed monstrosities writhing within. "By all that's holy," Rodriguez breathed, her voice tight with revulsion. A piercing shriek split the air. From side chambers, fully formed abominations charged, twisted amalgamations of species warped into living weapons. "Form up!" Darren roared, his mag rifle spitting death. His soldiers responded instantly, creating a wall of firepower. The battle became a desperate holding action. For every monstrosity they put down, two more seemed to take its place. Darren's enhanced senses were pushed to their limits as he coordinated the defense while simultaneously working to overload the facility's power core. In orbit, Admiral Trevelyan's fleet engaged the Breen Armada. Antimatter warheads detonated, ripping holes in space-time itself. Ships on both sides were torn apart by the awesome destructive power unleashed. Darren input the final override code, his fingers flying over alien controls. "It's done! Everyone out now!" They fought their way back to the surface, the ground already beginning to buckle beneath their feet. As they launched back into orbit, a blinding flash erupted behind them. The shockwave hit moments later, nearly sending their craft tumbling. When the light faded, the Breen fleet was in disarray. Human ships pressed the advantage, mopping up isolated pockets of resistance. Hours later, Darren stood on the observation deck of the Exodus. The system they'd attacked was now a graveyard of broken ships and lifeless worlds. A Pyrrhic victory, but a victory nonetheless. Admiral Trevelyan joined him, his uniform scorched and torn. "We've dealt them a serious blow, but this is not nearly finished. Our long-range sensors are already picking up Breen reinforcements mobilizing." Darren nodded, his eyes fixed on the stars. "Then we keep fighting. We find the next target. We hit it harder. We don't stop until humanity is safe." The Admiral clasped Darren's shoulder. "Get some rest, Captain. We've got a long war ahead of us." As Trevelyan left, Darren remained, watching the distant pinpricks of light. Somewhere out there, the Breen were regrouping, plotting their next move, and humanity would be ready. The silence on the bridge of the Exodus shattered as a fragmented transmission crackled through the comms. Admiral Trevelyan's eyes widened as he recognized Colonel Miles's voice, distorted and breaking up. Under heavy fire. Breen forces overwhelming, need immediate assistance." Trevelyan's fingers flew across the console, desperately trying to clean up the signal. "Miles, what's your position?" Only static answered. Darren Morris strode onto the bridge, his face set with purpose. "Sir, I heard. We need to move now." Trevelyan nodded grimly. "Agreed. Assemble your team. We're going in hot." Within minutes, Darren stood before his elite cadre of super soldiers in the Exodus's hangar bay. "This is a rescue op, people. Colonel Miles and her squadrons are pinned down in contested space. We're going in to pull them out." Private Chen, a wiry soldier with cybernetic enhancements gleaming beneath his skin, spoke up. "Sir, How are we getting past Breen patrols? Darren tapped a control on his wrist, bringing up a holographic display of a sleek alien vessel. We've integrated captured Breen stealth tech into our shuttles. It's our best shot at slipping through undetected. The strike team boarded their modified craft, tension thick in the air as they prepared for launch. Darren felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as the hangar bay doors opened, revealing the vast expanse of space. All units engage stealth systems, Darren commanded. The shuttle's hull shimmered, seeming to bend light around it as they accelerated away from the Exodus. Trevelyan's voice came through the comms. "Godspeed, Captain Morris. Bring our people home." Hours of tense silence followed as they navigated through hostile systems. Proximity alarms blared more than once as Breen patrols passed frighteningly close, but the stolen technology held. Suddenly, they dropped out of warp into a scene of utter devastation. What had once been a thriving colony world now resembled the surface of hell itself. The planet's crust glowed an angry red, great fissures spewing ash and molten rock into a thick, choking atmosphere. "My God," someone whispered. Darren's enhanced vision picked out flashes of weapons fire on the surface. "There! Miles and her people are still fighting. Pilot, take us in low and fast. We're dropping hot." The shuttle plummeted through the toxic atmosphere, hull plates groaning under the stress. As they neared the ground, Darren saw the full scope of the battle raging below. A handful of battered human ships formed a defensive circle, unleashing a constant barrage against waves of advancing Breen troops. "Go, go, go!" Darren shouted as the shuttle's doors opened. He leapt out, his enhanced musculature easily absorbing the impact of the 20-foot drop. All around him, his fellow super soldiers hit the ground running, immediately engaging the nearest Breen forces. Darren's enhanced reflexes kicked in as he dodged a barrage of plasma fire, returning fire with his own high-powered rifle. Each shot found its mark, Breen soldiers dropping with frightening efficiency. "Push forward," he commanded. "We need to reach Colonel Miles." The super soldiers fought like demons, their augmented bodies and advanced weaponry carving a path through the Breen lines. Overhead, Trevelyan's capital ships engaged the orbiting Breen fleet, buying precious time for the rescue operation. As they neared the human defensive position, a new horror revealed itself. A group of shambling figures emerged from the Breen lines, and Darren's stomach turned as he realized what he was seeing. Human bodies, twisted and warped almost beyond recognition. Cybernetic implants jutted crudely from torn flesh, eyes reptinged with pulsing red sensors. These weren't soldiers. They were civilians, transformed into monstrous weapons by the Breen. "Hold fire!" Darren shouted, even as his instincts screamed at him to shoot. "Those are our people!" The cyborg abominations lurched forward, arms outstretched. Some still had enough of their minds left to scream, begging for death. Private Chen's voice cracked over the comms. "Captain, what do we do?" Darren's mind raced, searching for a solution that didn't involve gunning down innocent victims. Then he spotted it. A small device at the base of each cyborg's skull, pulsing with alien energy. "Aim for the implants," he ordered. "Precision shots only." The super soldiers adjusted their aim, firing controlled bursts. One by one, the cyborgs fell, their implants shattered. Some died instantly, others collapsed, mercifully unconscious. As the last of the cyborgs went down, a towering Breen commander strode onto the battlefield. Its insectoid face turned towards Darren, mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. "You think you can stop us, human?" The alien's voice grated through a translator. "Your species is already dead. You just haven't accepted it yet." Darren raised his weapon. "We'll see about that." The two combatants clashed in a blur of movement. The Breen commander was faster and stronger than any opponent Darren had faced before, but the super soldier's training and enhancements kept him in the fight. Blows were exchanged at a blistering pace, neither able to gain the upper hand. Darren felt his enhanced muscles straining to their limits as he parried a vicious strike from the Breen's energy blade. Then he saw his opening. As the alien commander overextended on a thrust, Darren ducked under the attack and drove his combat knife up into the creature's throat. Blue ichor sprayed as the Breen collapsed, gurgling its last breaths. With their leader fallen, the remaining Breen forces began to falter. Darren pressed the advantage, coordinating with Miles's troops to push the aliens back. "Colonel Miles!" he shouted as he reached the human defensive line. "We need to evacuate now." Miles nodded, her face streaked with grime and blood. "Understood, Captain. Let's get the hell off this rock." As they began loading wounded onto the waiting shuttles, Darren's enhanced senses picked up an ominous vibration in the ground beneath his feet. He looked down, seeing the dirt shift and move in unnatural patterns. "Everyone, freeze!" he commanded. "Don't touch the ground!" But it was too late. A soldier stumbled, his hand brushing the soil. In an instant, a swarm of microscopic machines erupted from the earth, swarming over the man's body. He screamed as his flesh began to warp and twist, transforming before their eyes into a mass of writhing metal. "Technovirus!" Darren shouted. "Get to the shuttles now!" Chaos erupted as more patches of ground came alive with the Breen nanoweapons. Soldiers and ships alike fell victim to the swarm, their bodies and hulls consumed and reshaped into horrific new forms. Darren felt the nanites attempting to breach his own enhanced physiology, his body fighting off the invasion. He gritted his teeth against the pain, focusing on getting as many people to safety as possible. The last shuttle lifted off with Darren barely clinging to the boarding ramp. He watched in horror as the planet below them transformed, the technovirus spreading across its surface like a cancer. As they broke atmosphere, Darren saw the full extent of the devastation. Whole sections of Trevelyan's fleet had fallen victim to the Breen trap, twisted hulks of former warships now drifting lifelessly in orbit. Aboard the Exodus, the grim reality of their losses set in. Trevelyan's face was ashen as he reviewed the casualty reports. "We lost nearly half our forces," he said, his voice hollow. "And the Breen now have weapons that can turn our own people against us." Darren nodded, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "We need to regroup, find a way to counter this new threat. If the Breen deploy this on a larger scale—" He didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone present knew the stakes. Humanity teetered on the brink of extinction, and their next move could— The remnants of humanity's once proud fleet limped through space, a ragtag collection of battered ships barely holding together. On the bridge of the Exodus, Darren Morris stared at the holographic display, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. "Sir, we've reached the coordinates," reported Lieutenant Chen, her voice strained. Darren nodded. "Take us in, slow and steady." The ships eased forward, breaching the diffuse clouds of an uncharted nebula. For a moment, hope flickered in Darren's chest. Perhaps here, in this cosmic shroud, they could find a moment's respite to lick their wounds and regroup. That hope shattered in an instant. Alarms blared as sensors lit up with countless hostile signatures. Darren's enhanced vision picked out the shapes of Breen warships emerging from the nebula's concealing embrace. "It's a trap!" he roared. "All ships, evasive maneuvers!" But it was too late. The Breen armada opened fire, a relentless barrage tearing into the human vessels. Fighters and boarding craft poured from alien hangars, swarming towards their prey. Darren watched in horror as Trevelyan's flagship took a direct hit, its hull breaching in a silent explosion. The Admiral's face appeared on the display, bloodied and grim. "Morris," Trevelyan gasped. "They have something new. A weapon beyond. God help us all." The transmission cut off as Trevelyan's ship disintegrated. Darren steeled himself, pushing down the grief. "All remaining ships, form up on the Exodus. We're not going down without a fight." The super soldier sprang into action, manning weapon stations and repelling boarders. Darren himself took control of the main guns, his augmented reflexes allowing him to track and destroy incoming fighters with terrifying precision. But it wasn't enough. One by one, human ships fell to the Breen onslaught. And then Darren saw it, a massive alien flagship unlike any he'd encountered before. At its head stood a towering figure he recognized from intelligence briefings, Pollux, the Breen overlord himself. The alien vessel's hull split open, revealing a pulsing organic mass. Before Darren could react, it disgorged a cloud of sickly green particles that spread with unnatural speed. "New contact," Chen shouted. It's changing the nebula itself." Darren watched in mounting horror as the green cloud engulfed nearby human ships. Their hulls warped and twisted, fusing with the crew inside to create nightmarish biomechanical abominations. "Sir," Chen's voice quavered, "the virus is breaching our hull integrity." Darren's mind raced. They couldn't fight this, couldn't outrun it. If even a particle of this virus escaped the nebula, it could mean the end of all life in the galaxy. With a heavy heart, he made his choice. "Prep the warheads," he ordered. "All of them." Chen's eyes widened. "Sir, that'll—" "I know what it'll do," Darren cut her off. "Do it!" As the last of humanity's ships succumbed to the viral assault, Darren input the final launch codes. He closed his eyes, offering a silent prayer to whoever might be listening. The warheads detonated, igniting the nebula's stellar nursery in a cataclysmic chain reaction. The shockwave expanded outward, consuming everything in its path: Breen ships, infected human vessels, and the virus itself. In the aftermath, a single escape pod drifted clear of the devastation. Inside, Darren bled from a dozen wounds, surrounded by the few surviving super soldiers, all that remained of humanity's resistance. As emergency systems engaged, plotting a course to conserve what little power remained, Darren stared out at the starfield ahead. They were being pulled towards an unmapped region of space, a void from which no human expedition had ever returned. Darren felt the weight of uncountable lives lost, of sacrifices made. He didn't know if they'd saved humanity or merely postponed the inevitable. But as the unknown swallowed them, one thought burned in his mind. The fight wasn't over, not while a single human still drew breath. The pod plunged onward, carrying the last hope of mankind into the cosmic abyss.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.